So this is part 2 of solving a problem having to do with parsing codes and replacing them with names. This is the end result. We'll come back to it. Let's go to the query editor and look at the gymnastics we had to do to the data. Okay, here's the comments table. You can see that in the comments section, the user ID is used, and we're attempting to replace it with the name. The names and the user IDs are in this table. So our first step is to split the text string on the spaces. That gives us something like this. The next step is to unpivot the columns, so we just get each of our split out values becomes a single value in a single row. And at this point, we move from Power Query to working on our results in DAX. So here we have a concatenate statement. You notice that the ID repeats multiple times. So all these statements are part of a single ID. So we concatenate the name for ID that, sorry, I skipped ahead. Our problem is that in some of our values, we have a word like hey, and in others, we have a user ID. So we have a calculated column here that first checks to see if it's trying to deal with a value that's actually a code for a user or not. If it's a code for a user, it's got a square bracket. And then we check and see if there's something after the square bracket by using right, because some of the square brackets have things like commas after them. And then we get the length of the value, and then we modify the length. If it has an extra character, we subtract 1 from the length. And then only if it's a code row, we use mid to get the value out and leave out the comma. We use that value to go look up in table 2. Remember, we saw in table 2 that we have matching values. And then if it's a code row, so what we're looking up in table 2 is the name, the text for the name of the user. Then again, we use our flag and say, well, if this is a code row, put that username in. Otherwise, just put the value in. So we end up with this column, name for ID, where we have the words that make up the sentence that we want to end up with. So in order to get back from having multiple rows with one word in each row, we use concatenate X, which loops over the rows and builds up a string. So we tell it that we want it to use the values in the name for ID column and put a space on the end of them. We want it to loop over all the comments, and we want it to concatenate the comments that have the same row ID. The way we got the row ID was we pulled it out from the row when we started. So we're basically saying all the comments that have the row ID of the start row. And here we go. So once we've done that, we go to a report and we put a table on and we put the date, the full string, and the ID. And because we do not include the fields that are different in the different rows, the table very nicely throws away our duplicates and shows us the full string for each ID for each date. This was almost more fun than I could stand.